We're here at the Beaver Wildlife Management Area outside of Beaver in Beaver County, Oklahoma, just inside the Panhandle. And joining me is Dr. Dwayne Elmore. And Dr. Elmore, I mean, the ecology out here, the wildlife and the plant life especially, looks so different than what many of us are used to in Oklahoma, the main part of Oklahoma. Yeah. Can you tell us about it a little bit?
Yeah, it's one of the things I really appreciate about this state is just how much plant diversity we have as you drive from east to west. And we're out here at the beginning of the Panhandle really getting into a short grass plant community with lots of plants you would associate in short grasses with blue grama, side oats. We even have cholla, which is more characteristic of farther west, but there's a few isolated pockets of it here. Lots of soapweed yucca. And you contrast this with a dramatically different plant community on the north sides of the river and the south side of the river. We're on the north side here. And the south side, we're even going to see tighter soils and even a different plant community in just within a half mile.
Yeah, and let's take a look at this cholla over here. I mean, this is a pretty big one. So is the native range a little bit further west into the Panhandle then?
But you'll start to see lots of cholla when you get into Cimarron County, but Harper County and Beaver County, it's real isolated, and I'm not exactly sure how many of these plants were actually planted by someone at some point and have just persisted. Some of them potentially were native, seed deposit, but really we're on the edge of the distribution. It's not a common plant, but it survives in northwestern Oklahoma, and it's a great ornamental. Has beautiful flowers and fruit that wildlife use, provides some shade for wildlife, and it's just a really hardy plant for this part of the world.
Yeah, out here, I mean, that pop of pink color when it's in bloom really is striking on this landscape.
Yep.
But it's not the only spiny thing out here. We've got a few other prickly plants.
Yeah, so a lot of people are real concerned about thistle and want to spray thistle, and we do have some noxious invasive thistles like musk and scotch. But there's also a lot of native thistles that are not invasive, not a problem, and are beautiful and are wonderful plants for pollinators. And there's a couple here on site. We have a wavy leaf thistle and also yellow spine thistle. This is yellow spine thistle, and it'll be blooming here shortly. And both it and the wavy leaf are native plants. The wavy leaf occurs across a lot of Oklahoma, but the spine thistle is only in extreme western Oklahoma in the Panhandle.
Okay, all right. And we've got some yuccas next to it, and these yuccas, the seed heads on them are huge out here, and that's normal, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not only is it an attractive plant for bringing into a home garden, especially a xeriscape area, because it's very low maintenance, but it's also a really great wildlife plant. There's some insects that are specialized to this plant. Scaled quail, which is a unique quail in western Oklahoma, they nest in this plant, and wildlife eat the seeds off of yucca, so it has a lot of benefits to wildlife and insects.
And of course we keep hearing the bobwhites, and so there's a lot of birds out here that are more of those open rangeland birds, or can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these wide open prairies that just have scattered shrubs, it's a completely different wildlife community. There's lots of grassland and shrubland species that occur here that do not occur in a lot of the body of the state, and so it's really important to maintain these open prairie landscapes, and a lot of it's been converted in the past, and some of it is still being converted, particularly to eastern red cedar because of fire suppression.
So there's a lot of diversity here, and you're saying there's even more on the other side of the river.
Yeah, it's completely different as you cross the river.
All right, let's go take a look.
Okay.
So Dr. Elmore, we're literally walking out of the south side of the Beaver River, and the landscape has definitely changed. What can you tell us about the soil and the plants that we find on this side?
Yeah, so down in the river channel itself, it's a lot tighter soils. A lot of these areas will be grass dominated historically with scattered trees. A lot of it's sub-irrigated. Typically the Beaver River doesn't flow anymore. The water table's been depleted, but there is occasional flow, but there's moisture not too far down, so you get cottonwood and hackberry and a lot of trees. But immediately behind us, we see these big, deep, sandy soils that have been deposited over long periods of time from south winds These are real coarse sands. It looks similar to what we would see like in Ellis County and some of those river systems as well. There's not shinnery oak here, but there is sand sagebrush and a lot of sumac on these big stabilized dunes. And then when we drop into the river bottom, tighter soils, a lot of grass domination, and unfortunately, some invasive plants.
I was gonna say, we've got one tree that's here, large shrub, I'm not sure how it's referenced, but, and we've got one blooming right over here.
Yeah.
So a lot of people use this in urban settings, but out in the wildlife, it's not a good one, right?
No, I mean, it's a beautiful plant, which you can understand why someone would want it. It's kind of delicate stems and leaves and nice blooms. This is salt cedar or tamarisk. It goes by different names. It's an invasive plant that has really wreaked havoc on a lot of riparian systems, particularly in the western United States. And in western Oklahoma, it's all in the major river drainages, and it's costing thousands of dollars on some of these properties like the one we're on to try to manage it and control it, because what happens is it forms these monotypic stands, and so you can't get cottonwood recruitment. It limits wildlife use, like wild turkey that historically would have used these bottoms. They avoid these dense thickets of this plant. So it's just a good example of how we need to be very judicious when we're bringing plants in for ornamentals that or erosion control or whatever we're bringing in for, because some of them turn into really nightmare scenarios.
And the seed spreads through the water and also through the wind, is that correct?
Yeah, you get a flood event and you get a big seed wash downstream. So if you're going to control this plant, you really need to start in the headwaters and work your way downstream.
Okay, and we find them all the way, I mean, across the state into Payne County. I know they're down there at Cimarron River and stuff like that, so. Absolutely,
and you know, a big problem with this plant is we can mulch it or mow it, top kill it with fire, but it re-sprout. And so it's very difficult to control once it's established. You can, repeatedly burn it, but really the best control in a lot of these situations is chemical control. And so it becomes quite expensive.
All right. Well, let's go check out a few more plants that are on the south side of the river here.
Okay.
So now we're up out of the south side of the creek a little bit. What are we looking at here?
Much tighter soils on this side. You can see these reddish embankments in the background, old erosion events, and see that it's not sandy. There's very little sand on this side of the river. That's much tighter soil, and we're getting into a true shortgrass prairie plant community like we would see in southeastern Colorado and a lot of northern New Mexico, dominated by buffalo grass, blue grama, and still a lot of yucca in this landscape. Okay,
so definitely the landscape has changed, and we've only gone maybe a mile or so from the river. I mean, if that, and you can see the drastic change. So the tamarack that we mentioned, it doesn't come up this far out of the river?
It's typically, in this part of the world, confined to the sub-irrigated areas where there's more moisture than the river bottoms. But yeah, dramatic change in the plant community from the north side of the river going into the river bottom up on the south side, and we can see where we started. I mean, we've not traveled very far at all.
And are cedar trees a problem out here, or is that normally not an issue this way?
They are. They're spotty in the Panhandle, but they're becoming a bigger problem. It's kind of like in northwestern Oklahoma, Harper County, Woodward County, 30 years ago, a lot of people didn't think cedar was a problem. Well, and now it is, and it's kind of the creeping cedar problem keeps moving west, so it's increasingly becoming an issue out here in the Panhandle as well.
All right.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.